Welcome everyone to Vintura webinar on medical affairs role and medical affairs role in bringing optimum healthcare and care delivery to the patients. I realize that some of our wonderful participants are still joining us, but I would like to start with this broad welcome and introduction of the webinar, and that will allow other people to join and still fully benefit from the content. So good evening and also good morning to those calling in from across the pond, and we know that there are a few of those. We would like to take you today on a little journey through medical affairs, a little tour de force through several issues that we are all facing in medical affairs world, but also in healthcare ecosystem in general. So on the first slide, thank you. I think let me just start with a very brief introduction to the agenda for today. The agenda is really threefold. We would like to take you through some of the big trends that the healthcare system is facing now, not just because COVID has either revealed or induced those trends, but also they have pre-existed and are really redefining not only what does it mean for optimum care delivery to happen, but also how we as medical affairs or other functions in pharma can really participate in that and co-shape it. And consequently, we would like to take you also through the actual process. So if medical affairs is to play a different role, what does it mean for medical affairs organization and how to really reach that maturity to be fully equipped and perceived as a true partner to the healthcare system. And finally, we will also talk a little bit about actual examples, tangible examples of medical affairs as a partner driving patient-centric solutions from our experience and from experience of our clients. And I would like to urge you, we always say at Vintura and advocate with our medical affairs clients to become more proactive and more interactive. And we would like to keep that recommendation and that advocacy also in this session. So we would like the session to be quite interactive. Hence, please use the Q&A button to ask questions from each participant or any general question if it is not directed at anyone in particular. And after each little session, we will try to answer some of the questions, and we have reserved some time towards the end of this webinar for answering as many questions as we possibly can. And also, out of courtesy for everyone involved in this webinar, everyone participating, and due to the GDPR rules, I need to disclose that we are recording this webinar, of course, not you guys, but very much what we are doing and what we are presenting. And if you feel a little bit uneasy about it, you are, of course, more than free to leave, but also we are really hoping that no one will be particularly fazed by the fact that we are recording ourselves. So without further ado, let me also give you a very short introduction to Vintura, your hosts. Today, for those that don't know us yet very well, or for those that don't know us very intimately yet. So Vintura is a boutique consultancy working across life sciences and healthcare. And I think it's important to stress here that we work as much with clinics, healthcare professionals, providers and payers as we do with life sciences clients. But everything that we do is underpinned by a core principle that we want to drive impact for the patients in the life sciences and healthcare system. We are a team of 30 plus, always growing, very passionate individuals, and we are spread across Europe. And with our great partner, PharmaNext, we also have a global reach, which will become evident in the latter part of this webinar when we present some of the cases, some of the practical examples that are taken from around the world. And the participants of today's webinar, or actually the presenters, your lovely presenters today, will be Natalia Eitel, Pim Koreman, and Mark Talbom. Let me start in an order that the presentations will be happening with Natalia Eitel, who is one of our leading lights in our medical affairs thought leadership and practice. Natalia is also a co-author of our white paper, Medical Affairs in Transition, which hopefully some of you would have seen. If not, we'll be delighted to share it with you after the webinar. Pim Koreman is another medical affairs specialist in our great group, and he will be covering the medical affairs transition from a supporting function to a strategic pillar. And finally, Mark Taubel, who is a partner at Vintura and will be taking you through those tangible examples that I have mentioned before, those truly practical ways in which we as medical affairs can truly drive change and make a major impact in healthcare. And myself, I will try to be a host, trying to navigate the rocky waters of the new world of healthcare and healthcare ecosystem, trying to summarize the sessions, trying to answer your questions, trying to direct your questions to the right individual, and also contribute a tiny little bit to the discussion as well. So without further ado, let me just remind you very, very briefly of what we believe the ambition for this session should be. It's very much in line with the agenda I have presented a moment ago. We would like to really achieve the urgency or the feeling of urgency about optimizing the care delivery and what does it mean for medical affairs. We would like to really also urge you to think more deeply about how can we transform medical affairs to be best prepared for those challenges, and ultimately what impact can we have and are already having and should be having in the future. So with those goals in mind, and I'm sure many of you are coming to this webinar with your own expectations, and I'm sure there'll be time to disclose those through questions. I would like to yield the floor to Natalia, who will take you through some of the trends that are shaping both the medical affairs function as well as the healthcare ecosystem, and some of the elements that are changing medical affairs function and how that happens. And please remember to ask questions to Natalia in the Q&A bit of the Zoom meeting, and she'll be delighted to answer them towards the end of her session. Over to you, Natalia.
Great. Thank you, Tomasz. Thank you for the nice words. Thank you also for the introduction. Before we start, of course, today we are here to discuss how medical affairs can help optimal care delivery. I would like to start defining care because, of course, everyone has a different mentality. What is exactly care? So let's be sure that we are on the same page. No one can deny that patient centricity is not anymore just a buzzword, because the patient is not anymore just a passive health recipient, but is more and more becoming the owner of their own health. This also has some implications on the care delivery systems that we are facing traditionally, because the fragmented care delivery needs to be redefined as an integrated care delivery in order to have a holistic view on the full patient journey to maximize not only the value, but also to improve the outcomes for the patients. Nowadays, nobody can deny that preventing illness is something that is really on top of our minds. The vaccination frenzy in times of COVID is something that is the headlines of our day-to-day news articles every single day. So this not only has an impact on us, the way that we work, the way that we live, but also has a huge impact on the healthcare ecosystem. There is a greater need for transparency. Indeed, we are searching for more and more information on the healthcare quality, on the healthcare efficiency, but also each one of the patients that I already mentioned is also searching for their own experience when treating their own health. It is something that we're facing as well, a sustainability crisis. We have an aging population, but unfortunately, the healthcare budgets are not growing enough to match what is needed. So what we need to do is review our values and beliefs, because we need to understand better how to best invest our money in order to start rewarding outcomes instead of rewarding volume as we traditionally do. One of my last points is something that I'm pretty sure will resonate with most of you. In times of COVID, e-health is something that is also becoming part of our daily lives. I'll bring a personal example. So I'm asthmatic actually, and last week I needed to do a health check. And for my surprise, when I was trying to schedule a consultation, I actually had an e-consultation as part of my checkup. So this is something that I believe most of you are facing more and more. So having this e-health as part of the care, of course, is also supporting us in order to optimize the care that we believe should be maximizing the value and improving the outcomes for the patients. This is a shift that we see, all of those observations, and therefore the healthcare system not only is being affected by COVID, as you can see highlighted in each one of the trends, but it's also a need that we have to update our value and our beliefs, our mindsets. But indeed, this is also a great opportunity to life science industry. Because traditionally, what you see, we need to move from a provider of products to become partners in health. This change we really see in 3 different levels. High level, of course. The first one that I would like to discuss is the nature of the relationship. All of the pharma industry, but also the life science in a broader sense, this is something that is really related to the medical affairs, mainly to the medical affairs function, where traditionally we are always reacting on HCP requests. What we need to do is become more and more proactive in order to become the trusted advisor that we hope will be one day. To become this trusted advisor, we also need to renew and review the skill sets that we have. Of course, we still need to have the strong knowledge of the product portfolio and the therapeutic areas that we are acting on. But in order to be this trusted advisor, we also need to engage with the stakeholders on shaping the patient care pathway the best way possible. I already discussed the trends that are affecting us, the observations, the phenomena that needs to be reviewed. But of course, everything that I'm discussing is also completely aligned with the stakeholders' expectations. So normally, not only the deep expertise on requests in a specific domain is still required, but having this holistic view on the care pathway, on the patient experience, on the expertise on the healthcare ecosystem is also something that we need to review, and therefore this nature of relationship is changing and the skill sets needs to be reviewed. In a nutshell, to become the true partner to the healthcare system, we not only need to understand what are the current trends affecting us, affecting the pharmaceutical industry, affecting all of the stakeholders, but also be prepared to face all of those challenges together with our stakeholders and together with all of the different parties involved in the care. A couple of weeks ago, I think that some of you are already aware of a new paper that AstraZeneca Medical Affairs leaders published. That was something that was quite impactful for me, this quote, where they are mentioning that the pharma industry needs to change their model, transitioning from a pill to a platform company, which is completely aligned with exactly what I just mentioned. So moving from a supplier to a platform to a partner company is something that we really need to take into consideration. But also, most importantly for me, and I hope that you also agree with that, most of you there listening to us, is that the medical affairs function has the potential to modify the pharma companies and the healthcare. I'd like to quickly close my presentation a little bit, focusing on the why medical affairs should be the function that should drive this change. We truly believe, and this is also something that we describe quite in depth in our white paper. I hope that most of you already read it. Otherwise, as Tomasz mentioned, I would be more than delighted to share them with you. This figure that you see on the slide is something that I hope is very familiar to you, because what you see is that medical affairs is uniquely positioned to connect all of the stakeholders around the value for the patients, around the patient. And why do we say that? Medical affairs is, of course, fact-based, is unbiased, is a trusted partner. So all of those are prerequisites to really become a partner, to put our driving hat and really drive the change, connecting everyone about what is important to us in order to optimize the care. I won't go into more details because this is also a part that my colleague Pim will go next into the transformation journey that medical affairs needs to go through from the traditional function towards the integrated model, as we also deep dive in our white paper. But before I give the floor to Pim, I hope that most of you still have your mobile phones with you, because what you see is that there will be a very interactive webinar. So this is one of the first questions that we'll ask you. Please scan the QR code on the left side of the slide. And I would like to understand if you're in agreement with us in order to understand if you're on the same page as well, because this is how I started my presentation, in order to be on the same page with all of you. And while we wait for some of the answers to come up, Tomasz, do we have any questions from the audience thus far?
Absolutely, Natalia. We have two questions which I think are fantastically aligned with your delivery. The first question is quite fundamental. The other one concerns digitization. So let me first ask the fundamental question. We have a question regarding medical affairs. Would it become the main way that pharma is interacting with HCPs as to sales reps, and sales reps becoming less of an interactive role or less important function? So in a nutshell, Natalia, is medical affairs MSLs going to be the future of communication, the future of engagement?
That's a really great question. Thank you, Tomasz. Thanks, audience, who asked this question. It's a very important question. One of the main things that we see in every single paper that you read about medical affairs transformation, about the change that medical affairs needs to take, there is no questions about that. The expectations from the HCP is really to interact more on the scientific basis, so exchange the knowledge, but indeed having this role of the MSL instead of the sales rep. This is the preference that we observe on the market. I don't believe that really will completely substitute the sales rep. I still see the communication from the commercial team with the external world quite importantly. At the end, we have different goals. And of course, we cannot forget that we're still in a capitalistic world where revenues is also something that we need in order to survive. But all in all, I think that this shift on the preference of the HCPs or also other stakeholders, because more and more what you see is the network of stakeholders being completely reviewed as well, not only the traditional model where we are talking only to KOLs or to HCPs, but now talking to payers, to patients, and all of the other stakeholders. What you see is that the cross-functional alignment is more and more important, and therefore we really need to understand the way that we need to work internally, but also externally. I hope I answered the questions. Otherwise, let's take some minutes more at the end of the Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Natalia. That was very, very exhaustive. If I may venture just one comment, which is also related to that question. In work, when we work with our clients on an overarching business model transformation, not just in medical affairs, what we are seeing is already an increasing experimentation with what role sales rep and what role MSL should play, including such new formulations as therapy area expert, which is essentially an MSL with a commercial add-on function. Patient access ambassadors who are becoming market access function married with MSL function. So I think you are absolutely right, Natalia, that those roles of MSLs are only going to grow, and a traditional sales rep, not sales rep as such, but a traditional sales rep will be in decline. One more quick question, Natalia, or maybe very quick question about effectiveness of virtual interactions versus face-to-face. So how ensure as medical affairs that that's effective in the virtual world as we are in face-to-face relationship?
Great question as well. And I think most of you have exactly the same question, because when registering to this webinar, this is one of the main topics that came up when we posed the question, what are the key challenges that you're facing due to COVID? So I think most of the companies are struggling quite a lot on the virtual interactions. But all in all, this is the situation that we're facing. Digitalization is also a trend that is impacting not only the way that we work, but also impacting the way that we communicate as well. So answering the question more clearly, yes, there are ways in order to be more effective, or indeed as effective or even more effective than on a face-to-face interaction. Virtual platforms are there. You really are able to still have a connection, have short connections, but also using the multi-channel approach, because at the end, this is the most effective way. We even have a project now with one of our clients in JPEG, where this is the focus of the project, how to be more effective on a digital world when we are virtually engaging with our HCPs. And also to add to that, we have published a blog a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago, where we're facing and actually sharing some of our best practice of the virtual interaction. So of course we can share with you as well, so that you can take a look there, collect some of the best practices, and hopefully also apply to be more effective when engaging with your external stakeholders as well.
Thank you, Natalia. Absolutely, and this is directed to all our wonderful participants. Please feel free to reach out. Of course, with the confines of a webinar, we probably cannot be as exhaustive as we would wish to be. So any question that you may still have, or we have already started answering, we'll be delighted to deepen. Natalia, over to you to finalize your piece.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Thanks for the questions, guys. I'm seeing already on the screen that we are on the same page. I'm quite happy to see that. So I'll give also the floor now to my colleague Pim, because then we can go into the details of why should we drive this transformation, but also what is the journey that we need to go through in order to be successful in optimizing the care for patients. So thanks a lot. And if there are any questions, I'll still be here until the end. So let's take the Q&A session to answer more questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Before we yield the floor to Pim, and I'll give you a quick introduction to Pim in his session, let me just sort of very quickly loop back to what Natalia has been saying very eloquently about the trends and how they affect the new role for medical affairs, how we are really shifting to be a really true partner to the healthcare system and all the stakeholders. And really how COVID is further accelerating some of those trends. And what we are really seeing, and what I think is quite tremendous both in a negative and a positive sense, is many of those trends and many of those concerns that are inherent in healthcare system are becoming heightened. So the concern about sustainability is heightened, concern about the resilience of the healthcare system and healthcare delivery. At the same time, what we are seeing is very many positive trends that COVID has uncovered, which is the heightened sense of solidarity, heightened sense of social cohesion, which is unusual in the healthcare system, or has been unusual in the healthcare system. And finally, the greater appreciation, at least among some circles, for the role that pharma can play in solving or helping solve many of the socioeconomic issues. So with that sort of positive thought, I think I would like to yield the floor to Pim, who will take you through what is necessary to really fully realize that ambition of being a true partner, and how to take medical affairs from a point of being a supporting function to something that is actually quite tremendously impactful. And again, please drop your questions into the Q&A box, and I'm sure Pim will be delighted to answer them after his session.
Absolutely. So thanks a lot, Natalia and Tomasz, for that great introduction. And also for making clear that there is a huge opportunity here for medical affairs to really play that bridging role between internal stakeholders, but also external stakeholders, and to really collaborate with the external stakeholders to improve care for patients, because that's, of course, what we're all working for very hard here. However, what we also see is to be able to take that new role, the medical affairs function needs to evolve as well. And we truly believe that rapid evolution towards an integrated model, as how we defined it, is required for medical affairs to become that third strategic pillar in the pharmaceutical industry. And what I'll explain a bit is how we see that shift and what we think that evolution will look like. But before I dive into it, I want to share a bit of history here first, because the medical affairs function actually has already seen quite some change already. Fun fact that the MSL role, or you could argue that the MSL role, already exists for over half a century. Because what you see is that the first MSL dates back 50 years ago in a company called Upjohn. And that was actually really a rep with a scientific focus who reported into commercial. So it's of course clear that since then we already made quite some change within medical affairs. But what we see is to take that new role, we even need to push that evolution further. Because if you look at the slide and the maturity model that we defined here, you will see that a lot of the companies that we work with, a lot of the medical affairs functions we see during our projects, they can be categorized in the first two steps of that maturity model that we defined, which are really in a traditional and a focused model for medical affairs. And key characteristics of those models are that externally you see that the engagements of medical affairs with the external stakeholders are predominantly reactive engagements. So they are based upon customer requests and questions. They tend to focus on a relatively small set of stakeholders, so really focused in the KOL sphere, but also HCPs. And that the content of the engagements and the content that medical affairs talks about is really scientifically driven. So it's really focused on the science. And it means that internally, often we see that medical affairs is positioned as the scientific experts, because we know all the science, but also it's positioned as a bit of a supporting function. And if you look at what is needed to really take that role in the future and to really collaborate with internal and external stakeholders to improve care, we need to evolve to a more coordinated and integrated model, because only then we can be the true partner. And what that means is that our engagements should become a lot more proactive and really focused on a more collaborative approach with our external stakeholders, really working together and finding opportunities where we can improve care instead of only communicating about that science. And that means because the healthcare system is quite a complex system with a lot of different stakeholders. It also means that we will see medical affairs stakeholder groups expand quite drastically, and eventually even will take more of an ecosystem approach, because all those stakeholders have different relationships and they work differently together, all around that patients. So we really see medical affairs take that ecosystem approach around the patients to improve care. But it also means that in terms of the content that we engage about, we will need to go beyond the science and really talk about value and specifically what value is to patients, but also focus not only on content, but really developing solutions to improve care for patients. And in order to do that, of course, we need to change internally as well, because working together with those stakeholders really requires different skills from what we're used to, and requires us to move from, well, we will still remain scientific experts, of course, but we will also need to become more entrepreneurial and develop those skills to really work together with external stakeholders. And what we really see as a key prerequisite there to move there is strong leadership, strong medical affairs leadership internally, to really move towards that strategic pillar and the fully integrated model. If you take a closer look at that integrated model, you see that what we do as medical affairs will not necessarily change. So if you look at the next slide, you will see that the propositions that medical affairs delivers will not change drastically. So we will still be responsible for stakeholder education and engagement. We will still be the main antenna in the external world collecting insights, and we will still be responsible for evidence generation. However, how we will do that will change. You can imagine that once we start engaging with more stakeholders in this healthcare ecosystem, the insights that we collect will become different as well and much more valuable to really drive the overall strategy. One proposition that we do see change and added to this list when moving into the integrated model is really that last piece around partnerships and solutions, to really work together with healthcare stakeholders to improve care. And Mark will share some really great examples to show that this is already happening and already possible and adding a lot of value for all the stakeholders involved. And to really be able to deliver those new propositions around partnerships and solutions, but also the evolved propositions that we're already used to, it will require a different organization. But first of all, different skills from the people that we involve. We will need to broaden our skill set beyond the science, become more proactive and really focused on that external, being with our external customers and identifying where we can improve care for patients. To be able to do that, we need an organization that really supports those people as well, and that makes sure that we're fully integrated with other functions, that we're early involved but also that there is really a system that focuses on the development of our people. And what you see in science, it can often be unforgiving, and really about proving that you are the expert. I think here we really need to focus on improving and not only improving care for patients, but also improving ourselves so that we can be better at what we do. And then finally, of course, we need to evolve in terms of the systems that we have to support that new role, but also to improve our current role. I can imagine that sounds a bit like a daunting task. And well, Rome was not built in a day, and this will also not be built in a day. And that's actually okay, I think, because by taking small steps, we can add a lot of value already. And that's also what we see in the projects that we do with medical affairs leaders. And because we really see that when we move to focused and really align and improve the value messages that we engage and communicate about as medical affairs, we will already improve education, which is proven to improve outcomes for patients. If we move to coordinated, you see that as medical affairs, we can engage with multiple stakeholders really around a value story, and that will already optimize access to medicines, so patient access to medicines. And then finally, in the ultimate model, the integrated medical affairs function, where we collaborate with external stakeholders, it will really, of course, improve care, but also improve the industry reputation as a whole. So in order to guide that evolution, we developed a maturity model. And in that maturity model, we defined 11 elements on which medical affairs can evolve from focused, supporting function, towards integrated, a strategic pillar. And we won't go into the detail of all these elements here, because we can talk a full webinar about that already. But what I want to illustrate here is that since this is quite an extensive evolution and journey, that means that not all journeys will be the same, because everyone will be at different levels in these different elements, and that means that we will also all move through this maturity journey in a different way. So there's not a one size fits all, but a journey can and should be structured in a relatively simple 5-step approach that we detailed here on this slide. Because before we start moving, it is really crucial to first know where are we now. So to define your current reality in this model, so that you can then define where you want to be. So set your future ambition, and based on that, identify what is the gap between those two and where should you prioritize first. Because those priorities will help you form a plan in the short term of how to bridge the gap, that you can then execute and really drive the change. And maybe before we continue, I'm actually quite curious to hear where you see that your organization is at the moment. So based on first impressions, where do you think your organization is? And there should be a polling tool popping up now that you can use to answer that question. And I'm very curious to see the results of that poll.
Perhaps, Pim, let's give people a couple of minutes to answer the question. And in the meantime, I have a question popping up for you, which I think is an important one. And it's really, you've been talking about this great ambition of evolving medical affairs towards what seems like a distant future and a great ambition. But the question is, should all medical affairs really evolve that far? Should all medical affairs evolve towards the fully integrated model?
I think it's a really good question, actually. And in short, my answer would be no, actually. I think it very much depends on the kind of company you are, and also what therapeutic area you are involved in, and how much you can really contribute to improving care for the patients. so I think it will depend company by company, and it's all about the sort of the vision and the ambition that your organization and therefore also your medical affairs function has. And I also truly believe that the message that I told earlier, that you will not only add value in that integrated model. I think we are already providing a lot of value by doing what we're doing now. It is really, it is proven that medical education improves patient outcomes. So by moving small steps to coordinated, maybe, we also already add quite a lot of value.
Fantastic, Pim.
Do we have the responses from the
more natural to go ahead, Pim?
I'm curious if we have the responses from the polling question already. Can everyone see it? Because what I can see on the screen is that 26% says their organization is in focused, 52 in coordinated, so that's huge, and 22% in the integrated medical affairs function. So that's really, really great and interesting to see. And what we will do after this webinar is we will share with you a survey that we developed to help you define your current reality. So remember the position that you filled in, and when you receive the survey, have a look at the survey to see if they match. And I would be interested to hear if they do. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move to my final message. I want to close my section of this webinar with a question, because I think the real question that remains is actually, how ready are we? And that question was triggered by an interview that I recently read, performed by the Medical Affairs Professional Society with Isma Benatia, who is the VP Medical Affairs from Engine. And he talked about digitalization. So it's a different subject, but I think there's great parallels to what we're discussing now. And a quote from that interview is actually, it's around digital strategy, which is the strategy for navigating in the digital world. And what they mentioned there is that it is not just about equipping teams with the right technology, but also making sure that they are being skilled and comfortable in using that new technology. And she closes with, the technology is ready, and I don't think we are as ready as the technology. And I think it's the same goes here. So the tools are here. Mark will show a couple of examples where medical affairs is already really collaborating with external stakeholders to improve care. So the tools are there and it is possible, but it is now all about driving the mindset shift and making sure that we are comfortable and skilled in order to take that new role. And in order to get there, we need really solid leadership, but also enthusiasm to get there. And to help with that enthusiasm, I would like to hand over now in a bit to Mark to discuss a couple of case examples to show that this is really possible, already happening, and really valuable. So with that, I'd like to hand over back to Tomasz and Mark to take you through the next section of our webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pim, for this tour de force of a journey. And I think we, as we have seen in the little poll, I'm actually, congratulations to those who believe that they're already in a fully integrated model. I can't wait to hear more about the journey, if you would like to share it with us at some point. But also some comment, Pim mentioned quite repeatedly the capabilities that we need to develop to really get to that integrated model, how complex that journey is. And at points in time like these, I like using Professor Lieven Annemann's triangle. What is optimal healthcare system? Well, it's based on 3 principles. One is quality, the other one is solidarity, and the third one is sustainability. And it seems that medical affairs traditionally, and even in a coordinated model, is still focusing mostly on the quality. Whilst, as we are seeing from the trends that Natalia has very clearly elucidated, is that solidarity, the humanistic element of engagement, is becoming so important as part of what medical affairs does. And conversely, also the sustainability is becoming part of the medical affairs life, a medical affairs function. So discussions about health economics, which are traditionally sitting in market access or even commercial, are moving rapidly towards medical affairs. So I want to leave you with that thought of the triangle, the quality, sustainability, and solidarity, and see how medical affairs can really fit in all those three pillars. Because if we are talking about delivering on the promise of optimal care, we need to be present as medical affairs in all three elements. And I will, at this point, also give floor to Mark. Mark will take you through some of the examples of how in practice that happens. Maybe not how in practice we move to sustainability and solidarity, but how do we realize the promise and the ambition that medical affairs should have. And as a reminder, please use the Q&A function if you have any questions, either to the previous sections, but also to Mark as he speaks. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Thomas, for the introduction. And I think also really interesting to have the results from the polling question. And what I will tell you in this short presentation is a few selected examples of projects where we as Vintura work together with the medical affairs function and with different stakeholders in order to start improving care. I think really cool project to share with you, but also to really good to see what kind of impact it's already possible to make together with all the different stakeholders in the healthcare system. And maybe first to make a little bridge with what Pim was mentioning, I think that the medical affairs function is already in transition for a longer period. And it's also maybe good to realize that transition also takes time and takes a lot of energy and time, because we need to adapt to our new role. We should also feel comfortable in that new role, but also stakeholders should get used to us in our new role, and that's both internally and externally. And therefore, I think also I want to invite everyone in this call also to, if we have success and we see success by your colleague or by your team, that we also really reward all the effort, because I think it's quite a challenge for all the people next to your normal job, also being like almost for 50 years in the transition. So that's also not easy. And by saying that, I think that in this slide, actually, I'm extremely proud to present this to you, because here you see the work that we have done in the past 18 months with medical affairs teams all over the globe. We're working for the international organizations, regional organizations, but also local medical affairs teams. And on the one hand, that's really in preparing them for their new role. So that's really ensuring that, as Pim was just presenting, that they are equipped in order to have that new role, and that they feel comfortable, but that they also have all the elements in order to start executing on that new role. And there you see that we had a customer satisfaction score of 9.4, which is makes us really proud. And I think you can also read there some quotes from our clients. And we did that in almost 35 countries. So as Natalia was already mentioning earlier, we do that in really international settings, in preparing the medical affairs function in their new role. And what you see, and that was also what Pim was mentioning, I think it also varies a bit per region. So sometimes we think that in Europe we are a bit more advanced than in the JPEG region, but I think that it also depends on the ambition of the pharmaceutical company itself. So and there I think there's also a huge opportunity. So there is room also to take a new role and to start improving the healthcare system. So I think this is what I wanted to say on this slide. So maybe we can now move to 3 selected examples. And for each of those examples, I will highlight the role of medical. So the rest, I think that is on the slide. I will talk you briefly through it. And the first one is really in an interesting project that's still going on. That's a European project, so it's running in multiple countries, where together with the medical affairs function, we really started this project. So the medical affairs function, they had an ambition to that the whole secondary prevention for, in this case, then for patients with a cardiovascular event, that the secondary prevention becomes more and more important. And that's because I think that if you are in the hospital and you have an acute event, then every measures are taken in order to solve that issue. But it is not so sexy to think about the whole part for secondary prevention, sorry. And what we did together with the medical affairs function is really to see how we can change that mindset and also make a patient care pathway. So after the acute event, so what is a good protocol in order to treat the patients, that we also define measures, how we can really follow up the patients on their journey to remain healthy after an event. And with that, I think that medical was so well positioned in doing that, because they were positioned to talk not only about their own medical intervention, but also about the full care pathway, and to see what, for example, also lifestyle interventions could help, what kind of adherence measures you could take in order to ensure that people also were on the therapy for a longer period. Also using their knowledge on how to measure the impact. So I think for me, this is really a nice example where I think also medical is really well positioned in driving those projects, because they have the relation, they are able to talk about the full patient care pathway. And in this case, they also brought a wealth of information from studies from the scientific background that they normally also have. So I think this is really a cool example where in the end also the patients are really benefiting, because now focusing also on secondary prevention will also avoid re-events, and those are much more painful, but also for the payer much more costly. So I think that is a really nice example of how medical together with other stakeholders can improve the care. So this is one example. So on the next one, and this one was started, I think, a year ago, 1.5 years ago, and now with all the COVID pandemic, I think that it became more clear that it is really important to start creating a flexible model for your care delivery. So on the one hand, it is really nice for patients to get your treatment in your home environment, and in this case, it was for oncology. But I think now also the whole COVID situation revealed that it is important to also have a place where you can administer a medication in another location than always the hospital. And so this project started differently because COVID was not there. And it was mainly started because of the limited daycare capacity. But I think in the end, this is a project that really helped hospitals that were part of this program to build that flexible care delivery model, so that also they could continue the care also in those typical situations as we had and we still have due to COVID. And I think that also here medical was really supportive in the project, and they started together with us in the team in the project. But we believe also here, and that was also a learning that we had, that medical could play a much bigger role, because on the one hand, yes, we improved care and we were able to facilitate the whole transition of care outside the hospital. But I think that what we missed, and where medical could play a crucial role, is the fact that we could also think about how we could measure the impact and how we could also start generating real world evidence, which I think it's a missed opportunity. So, and that's also what Pim mentioned already in the models. I think that there are many options that we can also see how we can contribute as medical, and we cannot do it in one day. So Rome is not built in one day. So I think also this whole transition takes time, and I think this is really a nice example of a project that was successful. But I think that if we have involvement of medical, that I think the success could be even bigger, and I think that we were also able to measure the impact of the medical team. So that is this example. And moving to the last one, which is really a nice example on the whole trend that we see at the moment on further specialization and concentration of care for specific groups of patients. So in this case, there is within this disease area, you have really high risk patients that need specific treatment. And nowadays this is offered in all hospitals, which also leads to suboptimal care delivery. And this, together with the medical affairs department, which really triggered this initiative. They feel that if we were able to concentrate that care and we can set up multidisciplinary meetings with the different hospitals in order to start discussing the different cases from the patients, that we can really improve the care. And I think this one is for me an extremely good example where medical is also really accepted as a co-creator at that workshop. So during the discussions, medical was there, bringing in a lot of examples from other countries, how they have optimized those type of care, but not only within this particular disease area, but also with the knowledge they have from their colleagues on how it was done in other disease areas. And there you see that whole co-creating part that really suits to the medical function, because you see so many examples and you hear so many examples, not only in your own country, but maybe also during those get-togethers with your international colleagues, that in that case, I think you are well positioned to be that partner, as Natalia mentioned in her presentation, the trusted partner, in order to ensure that we can, together with all those stakeholders, improve the care. And I think that in this example, in the end, the patient is really benefiting from it, because if you really have that further specialization of care, that if you really at high risk and there is a last resort treatment that only a few KOLs know about, then I think it is really nice to that you are in that environment, and that really the experts together with your own hospital are deciding on how to leverage those treatments in that particular situation. So yeah, again, this is for me really a good example, and also looking back to what Pim and Natalia presented, an example of the transition that medical is in, but also that opportunity that medical has in order to together improve the healthcare system. So that is, I think, my last slide. So with this, I would like to hand over to Tomasz.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you for this confirmation of how much medical affairs can be an impactful function in truly bringing solutions such as home care, such as optimization of patient pathway, measuring outcomes. So these are all the buzzwords, but those buzzwords actually become reality and truly benefit the patients if they are correctly executed with the true participation and medical affairs often being in a driving seat. And I think this sort of leads us to some lessons that are based on our experience, some lessons that perhaps you will also recognize from your practice, is that this entire webinar is really structured around allowing and enabling medical affairs to step up to the role that it should play and it must play in order to truly respond to the healthcare system trends. So I think we all understand the urgency and we all probably have that ambition. But in order to truly become what Natalia has said, the partners to the healthcare ecosystem, but also partners internally in the company, we probably need to be a little bit selective. So we probably need to choose our battles. And when we say select the right partners here as a second point, we mean both internally and externally. You know, we do realize that the process, the step-by-step process of becoming or fully realizing the medical affairs ambition is an arduous one. And as such, you will need coalition partners within the company, be it market access, commercial, or specific people from cross-functional teams, but also the right partners externally. A success of one of the projects that Mark was referring to is really finding a group of highly enthusiastic clinicians who wanted to drive the change, who wanted to partner with the pharma company, and not those clinicians that very often still perceive pharma company as the necessary evil, which, believe it or not, there are still quite a few of those. And that leads to a second point. You know, by selecting the right partners, of course, we are taking a risk, but we shouldn't be risk averse. Very often it is about taking a risk and piloting a solution. Medical affairs learns very quickly and learns as much from science as it does from operational failure and success. So if you're going to take a risk, fail quick or win big. It seems very commercial in nature to say fail quick, But we as medical affairs, we cannot be perfect. These are the times when we can allow ourselves to fail in those pilots, to truly learn and also to become partners. As partners, we are sometimes vulnerable, and the vulnerability is actually quite a good ground upon which to build relationships with the KOLs, payers, and non-traditional stakeholders to whom we are not yet used to. And that, I think, needless to say, in order to be vulnerable and be a partner, we need to be transparent. Transparent in the discussions that we are having with the external stakeholders. We should probably disclose what our agenda is, not just teach them the science that we know, but actually say what is it that we are trying to achieve for the patients, for them, for the system, but also for us. You know, I think the mutual benefit is something that reverberates with all stakeholders because it's honest, and that honesty and that builds trust. And what I mentioned at the beginning that sort of closes it off as well is really choose your battles wisely. I think we all need to understand that within sometimes very narrow disease areas and very narrow eligible patient populations, they belong to the bigger healthcare system world, and the unmet needs that are pertinent to a very narrow specialization or treatment paradigm are also unmet needs that are pertinent to the system as such. So identify those unmet needs, which I'm sure you're already doing to a great extent, but I cannot stress it enough how important it is to always have this outside-in insight before building on the long-term strategy for medical affairs and how we're going to build solutions on that unmet need. So without further ado, in this little admonition, also before we move to a little Mentimeter that we prepared for you, or actually maybe we can give you a couple of minutes to answer that, because this is an unusual Mentimeter. We are not giving you a multiple choice. We would love to hear from you that based on this webinar and also your experience, you know, what action will you take? What actions have you already planned? Or maybe this webinar has inspired you to take some action for the better future, for the realization of ambition, for transforming medical affairs to a more impactful model. This could be anything. You know, this could be, as I said earlier, humanistic, socioeconomic, it could be scientific. I'm now joking apart. Please share with us some of the actions that you believe you will take after this webinar, or you are already taking regardless of this webinar. And whilst we're doing that, maybe there are some questions to Mark that you can answer, and I'm sure the answers from you guys as participants will start popping up very quickly. But there is a question to you, Mark, that I can see here, which is, I think, again, quite fundamental. Many of your cases were really based on co-creating solution, how medical affairs really interacts with clinicians and clinics. So the question is about what challenges, what are really about this co-creation and the joint solutions and working between pharma and clinicians? What challenges there are?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think that one of the challenges you already mentioned on your previous slide, Tomasz, and I think that's also an internal challenge. So I think that's also take that risk and start engaging, because I think that is the first internal barrier maybe to take. But what we see also in the actual collaboration is always a bit the hidden agenda and the trust part. So I think that's, as you already mentioned, Tomasz, so pharma and hospitals, I think it's a love or hate, and unfortunately in many cases there is still a bit of hate, and I think that the whole mistrust thing, I think that medical is so well positioned in order to overcome that, because they are really unbiased, so they can talk freely also about other topics in a patient care pathway than only the part around the medication. And I think that is so powerful. So, and for me, that is, I think that are the two main barriers. So internally go, and externally work on that trust part, because I think in the end we have really the same intentions in order to deliver the best care for the patient. And I think if that is really on top of mind, and we share that during our interactions, I think that we can easily overcome that one as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. And I think, yes, we cannot accentuate the word trust more than we already have. But of course, trust is not gained, trust is earned. And I think everything that we can do here with all the actions that we've outlined, we would love to be able to share with you in a great in the future and today. I can see here a note from our tech support that for some weird reason, the Mentimeter is not loading the actions that you have been listing, very helpfully listing for us. So maybe we should close without the results. If they come, we'll try to share them with you individually or jointly as a group of our great participants. And if we can move to the very last slide, just to say thank you for staying with us throughout this webinar. But also beyond the thank you, we are really hoping for the collaboration in the future. And for that reason, you can really look for some of our videos. Our great expert and partner, Professor Lieben Anemans, has created a video together with us on the role of medical affairs in life science of the future. We have written the white paper that we've referenced throughout the webinar about the transition of medical affairs, which is what Pim talked about. And it really is outlining the details of how to get there and how to do it, and what are the steps and what are the challenges. And there are some Vintura conferences, both past and coming up. So hopefully we'll meet very, very soon, and hopefully face to face with a much greater COVID-free world. So at this stage, I wanted to say a fantastic thank you. And we are really hoping that this webinar has been useful to you, and we are always ready to deepen those conversations. Please feel free to reach out to any of us or to all of us. And also thank you to our webinar participants, Natalia, Pim, Mark, and supporting us slightly in the background, Rihanna and Laura. And with this, have a wonderful evening, and hopefully speak to you and see you soon.